You're now listening to Keeba-Live on the Disruptors Podcast Network. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm your host, William Lee, and this is Keeba-Live. Boy, I'm kind of excited. This is a new program for us. We are starting a complete new series on the homeless today. This will be the first one in 3 different podcasts that will be talking about the homeless situation in the state of Washington, what we are doing or not doing, more on what we are not doing, and just get a kind of a large, I think, picture painted of why we need to start a real, true conversation with our politicians. Now, remember, this is the election year coming up, 2024. Oh, my goodness gracious. I was listening to the radio on the car as I was bopping back and forth over the potholes, in the roads and looking at the litter and at the side of the roads, of course. Beautiful graffiti as I was going down I-5 and a lot of more excitement going on with very few homeless people really showing up along the I-5 corridor or the West 16 corridor, which before the last couple of months got to be kind of popular. So I don't know where they moved to, but I'm sure they're somewhere in the city limits of Tacoma, moved back towards, downtown. I could bring on a song, Downtown. Remember that back in the 70s? Yeah. Well, right now, towns throughout the United States aren't the place to be. Businesses are closing up one by one because of absolutely no control over the homeless situation. Now, Seattle, or King County, is a front runner, and boy, they're excited about doing things, most of which haven't worked at all. Since the days of CHOP, things have chopped up and went pretty sour for the city of Tacoma, Seattle, and other cities. Been very lucky where I live in South Hill, Puyallup. Not too much going on up here. We do have homeless encampments, but they're out in the woods and they stay out far enough in the Frederickson-Graham area that they're not a problem as they are in the cities. Now, of course, you don't know what's going to happen next, where they're going to move to, as the county finds a way to get them off of property that's owned by state or city parks, sidewalks, and business fronts. They're going to end up somewhere. Seattle has been so busy since they've had 2 major fires in Seattle at the homeless camps that they don't know what to do. In fact, it's interesting to me that after one fire burns, a whole community out, okay? And that chases the drug dealers out because, you can't sell fentanyl when you have cops in the fire department standing there putting out these fires. What's interesting is that within 2 to 4 days, those communities are back. Maybe they're, say 100 feet from where the burned out rubble is. And they're rebuilding again and again and again. Seattle seems like they're playing hopscotch trying to move them from one direction to another. And they're not doing a very good job. Well, let's stop for a moment and not pick on King County for 5 minutes and take a look at the homeless situation all throughout the United States. Now, as you know and I know, homeless is deeply rooted, and it's a very complex issue. And it's affecting millions of people across the United States. There's no doubt about it. Every state's grappling with a social concern, what we're going to do with all these immigrants that we're allowing into the country, which massively end up taking over hotels and different things that the state and counties have set up for the homeless, forcing more homeless out into the streets. And we're really trying to figure out why. Why are there such high, particular homeless situations in these states? Now, let's take a look at the state lineup of homeless. This will shock you, I'm sure. California, 171,521 as of last year were homeless living in the streets. Now, just recently, we all know about the fact that our president met with the head man of China, and San Francisco had to make a big political statement and clean the streets and drive those people out of sight so that none of the politicians would have to just say, oh my goodness, look at that, the man from China seeing people in the streets, how awful. It's really ridiculous because I'm sure the Chinese really already know we have homeless people in the streets. They are watching our economy deteriorate. They are watching our morality material things deteriorate, our morals deteriorating, and they're sitting back going, well, I guess we should do something to help them out. So they made a pledge to our president to slow down on the machinery that makes, are you ready for this? Fentanyl tablets. China is one of the largest producers of fentanyl, and Mexico comes right behind them with tons and tons of fentanyl tablets that end up in the United States. Now, where do they go? To homeless camps. California, with 521 homeless people, why, that's a shopping mall for the drug dealers. Fentanyl is cheap to produce, and it's taking its toll. New York, for instance, only has 74,178 people on the streets in New York. Interesting, isn't it? Florida, 25,000. Wow, 25,959. And here comes, in the fourth position, running fine with a clear machine with politicians that are going to get out there and, well, what are they going to do? I've forgotten. While there's still 8 new ones came in just recently, 25,211 people living on the streets in Washington as of the count of 2022. Now, Texas at 24,000, Oregon, which has problems with everything that you can think of, is only sitting at 17,959. Now, these are the top 6 states in the United States which have uncontrolled homeless problems. Some areas like Chicago and other areas have taken strong stands against the homeless and are making it more disenchanting for homeless to show up. But we'll talk about those in other shows that we're going to be producing and putting on the air in our series of homeless and why are they homeless. The state of Washington also is grappling with some other big issues concerning the homeless population, ranking 4th in the United States, as I mentioned. Individuals are experiencing homelessness at a very high rate since 2022. The unsheltered homeless rate in the state of Washington stands at 50.2%, making it the 9th highest rate in the nation. That's right, boys and girls, and you too, parents and voters. We are the number 9er when it comes to this large problem. Additionally, the state has the 6th highest rate of homeless per capita. Now, how they figured out this per capita thing, if you want to be a math major, it's wonderful. But I'm going to just summarize it with this. There's 32.6. Now, I don't know what the 6th person must look like. It'd be very interesting to see. Individuals out of 10,000 people are without a stable place to live. They have no home. They're living on the street. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? So that makes our homeless situation, we're way out of control because back in 2007, we were only in the 16th position of homelessness. Now, you're going to hear about in our podcast about organizations that are really trying to make a difference. You're going to hear about millions of dollars that are supposed to be delegated to set up resources for the homeless. You're going to be hearing interviews from the homeless people themselves as we go through and find other sources of information through social media where they are actually being interviewed with no holds barred. In other words, they're talking from their heart to us through the social media organizations, or I should say platforms. That's very interesting too, because when you look at it, social media's gotten a real bad name lately. I mean, holy smokes. It seems the politicians have just smashed it. The Trump episodes, we have lawlessness, misinformation, garbage, that have filtrated in to social media which has taken it from a really decent tool of communication and distorted it. And I'm hoping that even this homeless situation, which has helped distort the information of social media, can be repaired. And you know how you can repair this? You and I and your neighbor and your relatives, your friends, simply can repair social media, can repair a lot of problems by starting a conversation, not a protest where we're going to go out with flags and banners and threaten somebody's life or blow up a building or plug up traffic for 50 million miles, which may cause somebody some serious consequences or even their lives. I'm talking about simple conversations like you and I are having right now. Oh, yeah, I know it's a one side because you're just hearing me. But this is what people have to realize. I really, when I got started in this, and we started looking at the homeless situation 3 years ago with Reverend Kelly Crow, and we'll be bringing some of the podcast from that era where Reverend Kelly really, I think, breaks down the situation of why we have homelessness in Seattle, or as far as that goes, why we have homelessness, period. Now, what causes homelessness? That's what you're probably trying to think. Now, what's causing this? Well, what we do know that homelessness is brought on by a couple of major factors. One is the wonderful economy that we have right now. But we can't discuss that because it's election year, you know. We don't want to discuss that during election year. But the economy is in horrible condition. You know it. I know it. Groceries are going up in price. Landlords are increasing rent and deposits. Building of new structures to house people are so expensive now that it's just astronomically impossible for a family, if they want to feed themselves, put clothes on their back, and shelter over their heads, to afford at $15.50 an hour, minimum wage, they'll flip burgers and make enough money to actually have the opportunity to live in an apartment. Now, that's brought on a whole bunch of facets that you could look at. You could look at the attitude of the developers who are building billion-dollar complexes. Wow, some of them are really nice. Or we could look at the big industry of millions of dollars being poured into tiny homes. Some of them actually getting out to the communities, other community activities due to the fact that supposedly we don't have enough money or funding to get good management companies in to take care of these tiny home villages. Well, it just shows a lack of, I think, resources being put in the right direction, money being accounted for and spent towards the resources of the homeless. But there again, I could be wrong. I doubt it, but I could be. Now, housing, which, we have plenty of room and funds to build affordable housing, but you've got to stop and analyze. We're limited by legislation and, there's permits and there's the environment and there's social balance in the cities, of course, of how this housing is going to be blended into the cities. Now, Seattle, for instance, is building, I understand, some reasonable facilities in Seattle. Tacoma is doing the same thing, where they'll have reasonable housing. Vouchers currently, for an example, are available, but the program is designed to combat increasing unaffordability of housing. And so far, it's not working. It works for the low-income families and allows them to pay 30% of their income towards rent while the federal government picks up the tab for the rest. Now, this is wonderful. When you say federal government, take a deep breath because that's taxes. Where do tax money come from? Those that are working. Here's the scrub of the argument. With the current administration, with the attitude that everybody needs medical, which the medical system is not working, which they need housing, which unfortunately in many states the money just seems for resources to be gobbled up in administration. And, of course, last but not least, the job market, which is, well, pretty good in some spots if you want to have at least a minimum of 3 people working because of minimum wages being so low to be able to afford a halfway decent place to live. Now, let's look at landlords for a minute. Landlords are still getting, to line their pockets nicely. Don't let them tell you they're not, because in districts such as Seattle, they are. And people get a safe place to live? Well, sure they do. Everybody happy, right? No. Even the landlords were free from prejudicial, setups, they make rent for family vultures, and I call them vultures instead of vultures. It's kind of like a big crow flying overhead, and the landlord's trying to keep the crow from attacking, and then they keep the housing in good repairs, and that's another problem, because some of the people that get the vouchers and move into the housing destroy the unit. Yeah. I've seen housing in apartments that you would not believe were so nice when they moved in, but for some reason, the younger generation, well, maybe even some of the older generation, feel that they got to have it. I mean, that's their right to have it. And if we have it, and if we don't want to have any respect for the landlord, or don't mind punching holes in the wall, or throwing pets in and locking them down for a couple of days and letting them chew on the woodwork, or making messes on the floor, or smoking dope, or taking fentanyl, or just opening up a house of ill repute until the neighbors get upset and the landlord finally has fought his way through the eviction process to get him out, then faces a large expense in putting the unit back together again so he can rent it. This is a situation that I'm not sure we're ever going to figure out how to do it in the large mass quantity of housing that we need right now. Now, the possible solution is to work within the limitations of our current system. That ain't going to happen either. If you don't ask for revolutionary change, or even for landlords to consider decreasing their profits, because they can't. It's simple as that. Every time a landlord gets ready to decrease the profit, then we've got to have another tax. Remember the tax that was not going to be way in 1980, when we allowed the state of Washington to start gambling? All that money for schools and hospitals and all that. We wouldn't have to have any more outrageous taxes and property taxes. No, it was all taken care of through allowing gambling in the state of Washington. Wow, that must have worked out great, because, well, they don't do it anymore, do they? Oh, but wait, boys and girls, what we're going to do now is we're going to have recreational drugs. Yeah. Boy, marijuana can be sold for recreational use, just like alcohol and alcohol sales. So far, that's tanked. Or has it? Or is that money just being pilfered and moved to different, well, shall we say, structural points that our politicians are very concerned about, like the lining their pockets? I haven't seen a politician lately that was elected to office after, say, 8-10 years come out broke. I haven't seen one yet. It's amazing, isn't it? Most of them go in as regular blue-collared workers with a halfway decent revenue stream and income, and come out millionaires within 10 to 15 years of being elected official. This is just, to me, painless. It is really painless, because we know where the money's going, but yet we do not stand the ground of opposing all this arbitrary stuff that they're forcing us into budget limits and all this unique stuff that they claim the homeless has forced us into. Now, well, we can't do this like foster care system. We'll have some shows concerning that. There's another area that's been hit. Mental health has been stepped on and thrown in the garbage can because we don't have enough money. Then we go through the programs of housing, which I just mentioned, but let's talk about drug enforcement, police departments that are being just absolutely scrapped. They're both, oh my, I get speechless. You stop and think about it. The politicians have ranted and raved and said, oh no, there's too much brutality. There's too much going on. We've got to defund the police departments. But yet, when it comes election time, they're all out there, we're going to fight this and we're going to get law and order back. But do they ever talk about refunding the police departments? No. Where do the police departments have a lot of job responsibility in? Protecting citizens, especially those in downtown areas where the crime rate is going through the roof, where drugs are flowing like down a river. And yet the police departments do not have the financing, they do not have the manpower, and they do not have the basics that are needed to really make things work. You know, they have to watch out about, well, things like, oh my goodness, we said something wrong, we may end up in jail. Or the laws have taken a turn through the courts, whereas they arrest them, and before they can actually get the paperwork done in the office, the, general population of arrests are bailed out and put back on the street. Or some sort of program is brought up, and they're returned back to the communities with a slap on their hands. What do they do when they get done with these resources? For instance, maybe a little help with drugs? Well, I'll tell you what they do. They go through the program, and for a percentage of them, they're right back out in the street doing it again. Rent is not a fundamental law of the universe, by the way, because that doesn't exist. But with an amount of resistance, we can come up with solutions and force the government to start looking at safety areas that benefit all society. We, however, need, and I stress this every time because this is what our network's about, we need a conversation. So I hope that this show will get you kind of interested in what we're going to be doing. We are really excited about the factor that we are in our newer studios. Our equipment is working for once. We look forward to the year 2024 to be able to entertain and, with a little bit of luck, start a conversation, because we know that will start action. Remember, as long as we keep a vision of positive thought in our mind and love for our fellow men in our heart to make a difference, we will always keep us smiling.